If you welcome back, we are Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs, and we are now turning from probably the first piece of the bill that addressed project-based infrastructure financing for housing, and we're going to turn to the rest of the bill, which our sort of Cameron Wood is going to begin walking through, and we have been collecting pieces of these. We've gone through a lot of it. We've had a lot of testimony on aspects. This is the first time we're looking at it all together. It's just missing what we're fondly calling the chip at the moment. All I can think of is Beauty and the Beast. With chip. I don't know. Just it. So, Cameron, it's yours.
That means like small and harmless.
Exactly.
And just a little,
Thank you.
a little chip killed property tax.
No, but that's what
Good morning. For the record,
Cabaret.
Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. Happy to be back with you this morning and to be in a position where we can walk through this. For some reason, I've always had issue with Adobe, or why. I'm assuming that is not zoomed in enough.
It's not very big,
Let's
but it is there.
give me a brief moment and let's go to this version. Is that better?
It certainly is.
You go
But
full screen.
not quite readable yet, but it's better.
So is it just one? Okay,
Great.
all right, so.
This is our committee housing bill at the moment.
Correct. So quickly, if you all remember a few weeks ago, I came in here and we talked quickly about some concepts, from members of the committee that were wanting to go into a housing bill for this committee, a committee bill. So as you'll see, for starters, since this is my first walkthrough, we do not have a bill number. So it's not S, but it's X. We're working off drafting request 250841 because it's a committee bill. Now, if the committee, votes this out and then moves to the floor, at that point, it gets its own bill number moving forward. So we are on draft 2.1. I shared with you on Tuesday a draft 1.1, which is where we were at that point in time. We've added to it since then, but since this is my first walkthrough, we're going to go top to bottom. So I'm just going to start walking through the language. You let me know if I need to slow down, pause, speed up, etc., and we'll see how far we get. So for starters, this is section 1, page 1. So reader assistance heading, we have the Vermont Rental Housing Improvement Program. So this is a current program that's run by Department of Housing and Community Development. The section here is based off the language that was proposed by the administration in their housing bill that you all walked through earlier this session in the joint committee with House General and Housing. So there are a few tweaks that are highlighted in yellow, and I'm going to walk through them with you. But for starters, we're just amending the VHIP program. One thing that was proposed is this sub B here, which what this does is, the departments, it can grant funds to a nonprofit who will then sub-grant those funds out to landlords to actually do the improvements in their rental housing units under this program, okay? And so what the administration was proposing is to ensure that those entities, as they're doing that work, because they're giving out loans, they're not having to comply with Vermont's Licensed Lender Mortgage Broker Act. And so the highlighted yellow is an addition to what they initially proposed at the beginning of the session, because they want to make it very clear, we're only talking about giving out funds under this program that would exempt you from the Licensed Lender Act, okay? Okay.
Yeah, Thomas.
I'm not familiar with the act we're trying to avoid. Is that anything you would be able to give me some contours of?
It is not my area, that would be Maria Royal, if you wanted questions specifically about what's in there. But, essentially it's if you're loaning out money, we have all these protections built in, to govern those apps. And in this instance, these entities are loaning out money. There's a 5-year loan, there's a 10-year loan. And so just wanting to make sure that, they don't have to comply with all the rules of those financial institutions that are doing that. So
And why wouldn't we want them to comply with the rules?
that is a question I will defer to the administration. It's their proposal.
Okay, I wasn't, so.
Okay, moving to the top of page 2. So what you have here under the sub D these are the funds or the current structure of the funds that could be issued out under the VHIP program. So you can get $70,000 if you're going to rehab a unit all the way up to the accessibility requirements under the Vermont access rules. So this is under the sub I. Or you can get up to $50,000 if you're simply rehabbing or creating an eligible housing unit. So if you're going to come up to basic, minimum code standards, you're up to 50,000. If you want to go above and beyond that to get to, the standards that are outlined in the Vermont access rules, then you can get additional monies. The proposal here is to strike the sub 1 and to just move with the sub 2, which is you can get 50 and then up to an additional 20,000. You can read this and say, well, what's really the difference here? A question came up in the House General and Housing Committee, which said, am I going to be able to access funds if I want to make simple, upgrades to an apartment to bring it up to the Vermont access standards, or am I going to be, kind of pushed out by this change? And I would say that may be something you want to ask the administration.
Is this making it more flexible to be able to use for more purposes?
I would argue,
Or I would really like us to keep this, we just logged our quarter.
Senator Weeks,
Uh,
or I can hover, whatever you want to do, Madam Chair.
oh,
Can we keep talking when there's only 2 of us? What's the rule here?
it's an interesting question.
If we open the door, we're sort of best of both
Yeah,
worlds.
yeah, we can keep talking. I'm not sure we can act on anything, but we could certainly keep talking. And given our time frame, let's do that.
We got a standing desk.
Okay.
And we have David and Randy here in spirit.
yes. It's a question I'll defer to the administration. In my opinion, the language here is becoming more limiting in that, you have these 2 different options, the sub I and the sub 2. They're removing one. And by my reading of this, it's saying that you're eligible for 50,000 for rehabilitation, and then you can get up to an additional 20 if you want to make specific elements related to the visitable standards. I read that to say
That
you have to have access to the 50,000 for rehabilitation in order to gain the access to the additional 20 to access to improve it to visitable standards.
guess
So I read it as a check and a limitation. The administration has testified that they don't read it that way, and that they think that you would be able to access any amount of funds under this for smaller
but the
improvements.
visitable standard is access,
Yes.
is that's access. So that is what we are talking about before, which is outside adding accessibility aspects to it. Okay. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so continuing to move down. Now, this is the other big change that's being proposed in this program, which is under the sub E. Okay, so currently under the VHIP program, the department is they authorize either grants, 5-year forgivable loans, or 10-year forgivable loans. And the administration is proposing to get rid of the 5-year forgivable loans. So at that point, we would only be offering grants for 10-year forgivable loans.
So, and remind us of the difference, the grants,
My understanding is there really isn't a difference at present, but the administration is proposing to make a change so that, and this is where we're gonna move to page, it's here starting on page 4. So I'm gonna skip ahead and then I'm gonna have to go back, but if you go to page 4, the proposal here is, if it's either a grant or a 5-year loan or a 10-year loan, you may recall that a landlord, once they, go through the improvements, they're required to comply with this sub 2A, which is they have to lease the unit to someone exiting homelessness, actively working with an immigrant refugee resettlement. It's one of these, conditions that they have to lease to those individuals. The proposal from the administration is that those provisions would still apply to the grants,
Right.
but they're asking for this change for the 10-year forgivable loans to remove all of those circumstances and allow the landlord to lease to someone as long as that lease is under fair market rent. So that's a pretty big change in the current program and how it's operating.
So they would no longer require that they have, and so they have a shorter period of time, right?
No. They're removing the 5-year,
And just going
keeping
to
the
10.
10-year.
But for that 10 years, they would no longer have a need to rent to anyone who had these check.
Correct. They would just have to keep it at a fair market rent, at a fair market rate established by a federal HUD.
Okay, that's a huge change.
That is a substantial change to how the program is. And I will defer to them as to why they're asking for it, but
At some point, I would like to know how that's computed and does it make sense? Because besides if it's fair market rent, is it a fair market rent? As far as what we know, but there isn't what people who are either landlords and tenants tell us. I'm just not sure if it should go
Right.
down at all.
Okay, so obviously we need to get Sean. Okay.
But I mean, HUD always says fair market
Yeah,
value for section 8, et cetera.
I don't know what that means to you.
Oh, yeah. So,
I mean, it's like federal mileage rate, like we could Google it.
Yeah, but is it reasonable in terms of what the experience is in our various locations in Vermont? Does it make sense? I don't know if it makes sense or not. It may very well,
Mhm.
but because HUD doesn't make it
well,
possible.
I
HUD might not keep doing it.
and then, but I think more concerning is that now we're taking away all the requirements that for this public money, this public $50,000 grant money, we are not asking anything of the developer.
I will say they're keeping those requirements for the grants. But they're changing it for the 10-year loan.
I thought
So it's the same across the board,
Okay.
Madam Chair. It's
Okay,
a
so we're keeping it
requirement.
for the loan, but we're
Right.
getting rid of it for the grant, and the grant is now just fair market.
The loan's fair market value, the grant is still required to lease to one of these people, one of these individuals experiencing one of these circumstances.
So
Okay.
that's the grant. Okay, so let's
Okay.
keep going.
One proposal, so I've moved back just a little bit because I'm on page 3 here. So this is a proposed change from the administration, one from the administration and one from Senator Hinsdale, if I may. So these are for the grants.
So sorry, what page are you on?
This is page 3.
Right.
So again, under the grants, if the landlord receives a grant from the department, they would be required to then lease the building to an individual in one of these categories. And so we would be adding a category to say an individual who is displaced due to activity related to climate change or due to a natural disaster. And so that would be added in there as a category of individual that could then the landlord could lease to. The administration is also proposing to add the sub 5.
Right,
So with approval from the department in writing, an organization that will hold a master lease that explicitly states the individual will be used in service to the populations described above. It's kind of a catch-all category the administration is proposing to add there. So again, I apologize if I confused it earlier. The grant stays and these requirements will still apply with the grant. The loan would change to the fair market rate. Okay.
great.
There's a few other minor changes in here. They're asking for on the loan forgiveness, instead of a 10% loan forgiveness, it's going to prorate it. let's see, as I walk through the remainder here, there's also this addition at the end where they're proposing to add that it becomes a revolving fund. So the monies that they have that they're loaning out or granting out, monies that they're collecting back, it just goes back into the revolving fund for purposes of continuing the program moving forward.
Right.
And I mean, it would be hard for us to get a lot more from a revolving loan fund. I mean, they do have to, this is to create more units.
Right.
I don't think we can make it do everything we want and they're paying, and it's a loan, they're just trying to build more rental units, not create affordable housing with state money.
Exactly.
Okay, so if you have the administration in, again, I think the two key things are why are we getting rid of the 5-year loan? My understanding is they will say nobody uses the 5-year loan, and then they're
It's
changing
because
it
it's
to.
tax, it's taxable.
It's tax, that is a big piece of it. Yeah. So the other thing I'm not seeing here, and forgive me, I'm just not seeing it, it's here, is where they make this a permanent embedded in statute versus a sort of a
So,
extended pilot.
so VHIP is permanent currently.
That's what I thought we
Yes.
had done. a couple of
The next program that we're going to talk about, the manufactured
manufactured.
improvement, yes,
Right.
that is where
That
we're,
one.
and so yes, perfect segue, Madam
Thank
Chair. We're
you.
moving
I
to
meant
the
to serve.
moving to the top of page 6 here, where we're going to talk about the manufactured home improvement and repair program. This is a program that they've currently operated for the past few years. It's been in section law. They've been provided funds to do so. And here we're moving this into statute, 10 VSA 700. So we're adding this section, which would then make it a permanent program at this point. And then they would subsequently ask for funds potentially moving forward on an annual basis. And the program is essentially moving over nearly copy and paste word for word from what has been approved in the past in session law. Very quickly, they can award, $20,000. We're on B1 here on the bottom of page 6. $20,000 to owners of manufactured housing communities to do small scale capital improvements to help, infill vacant lots. This can be getting rid of abandoned homes, grading and prep. Removing housing out of flood zones, improving septic, etc. Moving forward, top of page 7, they can provide funds directly to a homeowner for which the home is their primary residence to address habitability and accessibility issues. And then finally, under the sub 3, they can award funds to a homeowner to pay for putting in a foundation or site prep, etc. Okay. So again, that's in the administration's proposal, and that is making that program permanent. I'm moving forward on page 7. So we're moving into section 3. You all just kind of spoke with Ted about this towards the end of his
Yeah.
presentation and conversation. This is the Vermont Infrastructure Sustainability Fund.
Right, we're getting Michael Gunn in on Monday the 10th.
And again, this is a
We
proposal.
help Michael.
This is their proposal here. So we've done some minor language tweaks to just, work with our drafting style. But this is creating this sustainability fund within the Vermont Bond Bank. The fund
Right.
here under the purpose is to provide capital to extend and increase capacity of water and sewer services and other public infrastructure in municipalities where the lack of extension or capacity is a barrier to housing.
So I think I'd note here that I think this complements the chip work that we did earlier, for lack of a better thing, and also it enables, particularly if we gave it more money, it could enable towns who are ready and able to just bond for this directly to do a project
I think that is a fair statement.
without having to go through a chip process. So it gives them some options, gives towns more options.
And I do want to flag that I think this is going in Ellen's bill. That's a cleanup of the Home Act. But I just want to say here, this is where we put public dollars into water and sewer.
Yeah.
And I think we need to underscore our intent from the Home Act that you are allowed to build more densely along water and sewer. And along water and sewer means it is on the road that, that you're on, because that's coming up in debate around municipal projects. And this is where we want to build capacity and infrastructure, but we should be asking for more than single family housing with large acreage to be going on that.
Let's,
Water and sewer infrastructure.
we could add a little more criteria to this. For one.
We could, that's in the bill that Ella and I think will walk through is, that underscoring of our intent in the home act.
The top of page 8, we have just, some standard provisions here, administration of the program, it's administered by the Vermont Bond Bank. Then we have the parameters of the program. You all kind of walked through this with the administration a few weeks ago, so I'm trying to keep it a little more high level and not necessarily line by line, unless you would like to. But they're obviously having to administer it in consultation with the Housing and Community Development. They do have guidelines for the program. It's intended to provide low interest loans or bonds to municipalities. Here are the eligible activities that they have. And then there are some requirements. So here are the requirements on the top of page 9. The project has to create reserve capacity necessary for new housing. It has to have a direct link to housing unit production, and the municipality has to have a commitment to own and operate the project throughout its life. And then we have some criteria. We're on page 9 here, starting with line 6. Criteria that the bond bank would be required to look at when examining applications. And some of these here, whether there's a direct connection to proposed or in progress development, the project is an expansion of an existing system, the project readiness, estimated time for financing. The sub 4 here, I'll just flag for the committees one I'm a little unfamiliar with exactly what it is or what it means. I've flagged this for the bank and the administration just to make sure I've worded this correctly, and you may want to ask them exactly what this means here. Again, it's just something I'm not familiar with, but it's the ranking of the community on the Vermont Department of Finance and Management Vermont Community Index. And lastly, the criteria demonstrating a financing for the project completion or completion of the project. Lastly, here we have the award terms, what is required under the terms of the award that would be provided to the municipality. And then finally in sub H, we have the fact that it's a revolving fund. So funds repaid or returned will just stay in the fund and continue to go out to fund more projects. Okay. Page 10, moving into the next section here. This is sub 4. So this is Vermont Housing Finance Agency asking for the ability for tax credits for the continuing first generation home buyer program and the down payment assistance program. So these have been enacted, recently in the past few years in session law. So this is adding it in statute. So making one of them more permanent into perpetuity, adding one of them into statute to last for another 5 years. The other thing that was requested by VHFA was just if this is going to go into statute, then making sure we have a definition of first generation home buyer. That's one of the programs that's, the first generation home buyer. This is the definition that was in session law. So I haven't made any changes here. So we're just bringing that over, but it is an individual whose parents or legal guardians do not have and during the home buyer's lifetime have not had a residential ownership interest in a estate. They haven't lost ownership of a home due to foreclosure, short sale, etc., or who has at any time been placed in foster care. So pulling that definition over. And then here on the bottom of page 11, top of page 12, we have 250,000 total first year credit allocations for grants for first time home buyers who are first generation home buyers, and an aggregate limit of 1.25. And then down at the bottom of page 12, we have the down payment assistance program. So up to 250,000 in first year credits. That one is limited from 2027 through 2031. As you can see, they're already operating a program through 2026 here. So we're giving it another 5-year extension essentially with this language.
I just want to say, I don't understand any of these programs, so I hope I don't have to present this on the floor. So I'll just put that out there.
This provides down payment assistance up to, I think it's.
Sure, but it's like-
15,000 something.
It's up to 15 or 20,000 down payment assistance.
But that was the grant and this is a tax credit, so it might.
I guess what I'm just saying, crowdsourcing down to YouTube, I welcome other people to understand these things more and what the implications of these might be and concerns, because I'm not seeing this.
I frankly have concerns about the definition in terms of the notion of it going to someone who is actually needing as opposed to someone based on their parents' background.
So
This is-
we have another program for first time home
I know
buyers.
we do.
You know,
That's what
so
this-
that program's been extremely successful.
This is
Um,
both of them.
Well, right, I mean, first generation home buyer is, it's still gonna be up to a bank in partnership with VHFA to make these credits available and to make the loan available. But it's a bit of a catch if you have enough money to qualify to purchase a home, qualify for a loan. You know, but we want to make sure you have some need. A lot of this is kind of putting in the marquee, hey, we know you don't have a lot of experience seeking this kind of financial tool. Walk on in, you know, and we'll help you figure it out. So I think if you, we've discussed it over the years, if you talk to those banks and Mara who are managing the program, they've of course steered it toward people who otherwise don't think of themselves as able to get a home loan and yet may have the finances to qualify. And this is a big advertisement to them that we will help you.
But as I say, it is a criteria that I'm not simply uncomfortable with. Because there are people who will be rejected from this type of loan because they don't fit into that bucket, who are equally deserving.
Well, this is a tax credit. There's a first time home buyer parallel program. And what we know from that is that has helped people.
We may know that it works, but I'm not, but I question the fairness and appropriateness of it.
I think
In a nutshell.
if there are this many questions, we will have more or Chad come back in. But I think it is designed to do two things. One is enable more first-time home buyers. We have acknowledged that home ownership is an important thing and to begin to break some of the generational, to build generational, an asset for people who have we're trying to break
Right.
generational poverty.
And more
And
will
then-
come
I
in.
understand
Let me just finish.
everything that you're trying to do, everything you're trying to break. I just question the
Fine.
fairness and appropriateness of this as a criteria to make a financial decision involving
Fine.
other people who may be equally deserving.
I know Maura will come in and say that we have the first time home buyer. I wrote that 15, years
We
ago,
know.
I want to say now. And we built this on top for people who, really don't have anyone to support, that last mile
As
financially.
I say,
to become a homeowner.
I think it's a very arbitrary decision to base it on something such as, in effect, for all intents and purposes, ancestry, whereas the person applying, who could be applying, could be equally deserving based on a whole variety of factors related to that person who is there applying for that particular.
And that is why we have the first time home buyer program as well. So it covers, I hope, both, but we will get more to come in and clarify this. For people. Okay.
Okay. I'll just echo Sam Jensen here, trying to wrap my head around how this stuff works. It's been
How it works, I think it's key question, but that's its purpose.
Yeah.
Those
Okay.
two pieces.
I'll bring us back to page 13. Okay, so we've simply moved on from those two programs. I agree. If you have those kind of detailed questions, I would ask VHFA. So page 13, we're going to move into the creation of a study committee. So this was information that came from external. I cannot remember off the top of my head the individual entity that sent this request in, Madam Chair, forgive me. But this was to create a study committee to look at how to develop essentially a plan for creating housing for individuals with developmental disabilities.
This is the work that VHCB, along with our developmental disabilities community, we heard from Susan Aronoff and we heard and Chris Donnelly and VHFA.
Okay, so as you can see right here, sub A, we're creating this planning committee to specifically generate a state plan to develop housing for individuals with developmental disabilities. We have membership under sub B, current member of the House, current member of the Senate, Secretary of AHS, Commissioner of Dale, Commissioner of Department of Housing, State Treasurer, one member appointed by the Developmental Disabilities Housing Initiative. Moving to page 14. Executive Director of Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council, a member of Green Mountain Self Advocates, a member of Vermont Care Partners, and a member of Vermont Housing and Conservation. Specifically, what is the committee doing? They're supposed to create an actionable plan, so on line 7, to develop this housing that reflects the diversity needs expressed by those individuals and their families, including individuals with high support needs who require 24-hour care and those with specific communication needs. The plan shall include a schedule for the creation of at least 600 additional units of service supported housing, the number and description of the support needs of individuals with developmental disabilities anticipated to be served, anticipated funding needs, and recommendations for changes in state law or policy that are obstacles to the development of housing needed by individuals with Medicare funded home and community-based services.
Right, thank you.
Right there, bottom of page 14, you're going to have a report coming back November of 2025.
Right, so that we can act on it for next year. Because
I just study committee.
well, this
Early
committee,
study committee, growing up.
I mean, this one has been requested by people who want to participate. That feels like a difference to me.
Sure.
And I also have proposed language to jumpstart more of these projects because I know this group has felt like they've had so little attention. They just want to have the focus, and they are pointing out something really important, which is that funding these is a win-win-win where they are more self-perpetuating than other types of housing, and government has a real role here.
Yeah. Because it's not necessarily going to be privately. It's not necessarily going to be private developers for that choice, and it needs. But also, I think key to this is there are two pieces that have come together that have made it a bit of a crisis. I mean, in the past, the Brandon having closed, but also succession planning. A lot of these parents are aging out of being able to take care of these people, of these kids, and now grown-ups. And also COVID. We had homes that where people had taken a lot of the developmentally disabled in and had happily housed them for many years, and they are also aging out and or after COVID are not willing to participate. So I think we have two crises coming together sort of at the same time, which makes the urgency of this big. And we have some very, sort of important nonprofits coming together to try and come together with a plan for how to deal with.
Is my other language in here?
No.
Okay. Gotcha.
So does that help, Tom?
I just want to say I completely agree, and I think that reports in these committees, these task forces help inform future ledge council as well as future legislators with concrete things to reference. So they've grown on me.
Given our limited time,
When you were on a committee long enough for us to see something gazed at year after year, rather than us do something with a study we received in the past,
Fair enough.
that's when I start to get concerned. And Cameron is helping me work on language because we have also great businesses in the state like Wheelpad that create accessible ADUs so that someone can modify their own home, which is probably how we're going to get more bang for our buck than huge apartment complexes. Although I would like to see more of this bill, the ADU route is probably going to help. And I think this is something for us to philosophically talk about with health and welfare and other committees. A human services policy has added to the housing crisis, which is that if you are the parent of an adult disabled child, you are not eligible for any compensation that would support their living expenses because it's seen as kind of the possibility for exploitation and not letting your child have their independence as an adult. I'm very sympathetic to that, but I hope if we can maybe look at ADUs being separate enough that a parent could help pay for their independence under the same roof line, if that makes sense, or maybe an adjacent home on the same property. I mean, it's to me a policy that may have reached the end of its useful life where it has to be re-examined, because otherwise it's very expensive and very challenging for people to find another responsible caregiver who's going to take that person in. And so they end up sometimes in more untenable, more expensive situations.
Exactly. Okay, the bottom of page 15.
Yeah, quickly, I just, to finish this, committee out, I just want to highlight a few things I put in here as placeholders that you all may want to change. The meetings, I've added the Secretary of Agency of Human Services calling the first meeting. You may want that to be someone else. I put it as July 15th. You may want that to be a different date. I put the committee shall select a chair from among its members. You could designate a specific chair if you so choose. And then we have a majority of the membership shall constitute a quorum. I put the committee shall cease to exist on November 30th. I did that intentionally. The report is due on November 15th, knowing that sometimes it can be difficult for an outside entity to get a reporting exactly when it's due, giving them 15 days after, but that may be something you want to look at or change. I do have compensation for attendance during the meetings. Legislative members who are there in their legislative capacity would be entitled to per diem. I have not attached in this bill any appropriation to this, and there's a few other appropriations that I wasn't able to get in the bill. We're going to get to actually the next section. Would have an appropriation request from the state treasurer. I haven't added that, so there's a few pieces that I need to.
Right, and there are appropriations in the bill, some embedded in the
Yes.
governor's recommend and
Yes.
some not. And
So-
there may be some increases, like the bond bag piece that we may want to increase, given how important it is.
Correct. Okay,
And the convening of it is legislative, right?
bringing them to, I'm sorry.
So we have legislative members,
So, yes, there is a member in the House and a member of the Senate on the committee.
so it will be legislatively staffed.
We would need to, that's a thing I was not able to discuss with you before this. So if you wanted it, we would need to add language to say that, they would have the support of the Office of Legislative Counsel, et cetera, for administrative.
Because otherwise we're
purposes,
not
et cetera.
calling anyone else to convene.
Otherwise, you're not having anyone else support them. I have it as the Secretary of Human Services would be the one to call the first meeting. But there isn't any entity in here that would be staffing the committee, if you will. And we would need to call that out specifically if you wanted Ledge Council to do it or if you wanted someone else to do it.
Okay, good discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
Moving to the bottom of 15, we have the positive rental payment pilot program. So you all may recall, and the bill you passed last year, I believe 181, required the state treasurer to review and report back on establishing a pilot program for reporting individual tenants' rent payments as part of their credit history.
Right.
And so the state treasurer's office did issue a report, and their recommendation was to provide them authorization and funding of $100,000 to initiate a pilot program to move this forward. And so that's what we have here. So under the sub A, bottom of page 15, moving to the top of 16, we have the creation. So the state treasurer shall create and implement a positive rental payment reporting pilot program in order to facilitate the reporting of participant tenant rent payment information. Have it beginning on January 1, 2026 and ending on December 31st, 2027. Before I move forward, I will pause and just say I shared this with the state treasurer's office, but only this morning. So they have not provided any feedback on this. I mentioned that the committee would be meeting again immediately right after town meeting. And so if they had immediate feedback, please get it to me next week. So I just want to comment, they haven't had the opportunity to weigh in here yet. So moving forward, so B, to implement the program, the treasurer shall enter into agreement with one or more affordable housing providers in the state in accordance with the requirements of the section to participate in the program. ensure that the information being provided to the credit reporting agencies includes only rent payment information concerning a participant tenant's payment or non-payment after the date on which the participant tenant elected to participate.
Can I just interrupt? I'm gonna go off to a conference committee meeting, but just one question I have about the criteria at the end of whether or not report date we should think about, is there any mechanism to determine whether or not this made any difference in the average credit reporting numbers for the people who participate? The goal of this is to increase.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you can't
To
measure
improve the
that,
credit score.
you may know that there are a bunch of people participating, but if their credit scores are going down rather than up, we haven't achieved what we intended to. And it may not be easy to do, but it's something to at least throw on the table to.
Champlain Housing Trust already does this,
Do they?
and they've seen a lot of success. So they can speak.
Yeah,
to
just
that.
something to be able to measure that, I think.
Yeah,
And
they've seen an increase in overall credit scores of their tenants. Yeah.
And Mr. Vice Chair, we'll add something in there to that effect, or we'll say from the other studies, similar results have occurred, but we'll make sure that. Okay, so again, the state treasurer has to establish a standard form for the participant tenant to elect to participate or cease participation. That form needs to include certain statements to make sure the tenant is aware that this is voluntary participation. The person can cease participating at any time. A statement that the participant's rent payments will be reported regardless of whether they're timely, late, or missed. And that reporting may commence within 30 days after they elect to participate. And a statement that if they cease participating, they may not resume participation in the pilot program. I will also say similar pilots have been done in other states. And so I used a lot of this language was actually done in Colorado a few years ago. And so I kind of, instead of recreating the wheel, used a lot of information from their pilot program. So that's where a lot of this language comes from.
And perhaps you would be kind enough to get us how many of those pilot programs have actually become then, but move beyond pilot and into being incorporated into statute.
I will review the state treasurer's report, and they may be better to speak to that. I don't know that California has moved to a permanent program subsequent. I think there's just concluded last year, for example. So maybe not enough time has passed. I believe California has a program in place, a permanent program. And I'm just kind of trying to remember from my reviewing of the state treasurer's report, but I will just try to double check that, Madam Chair, when we reconvene.
That would be great.
Okay, so quickly moving through this section, the state treasurer can enter into agreements with one or more entities for transmitting the information. So they're entering into agreements with the affordable housing providers to enroll the tenants. And then they have the authority to enter into contracts with third-party entities to actually facilitate the reporting of the information up to a credit reporting agency. If an affordable housing provider is going to agree, then here are the things that they have to agree to in writing with the state treasurer, that they will participate in the duration of the program, that they will not charge a participant tenant for participation because these things do cost a little bit of money to do the reporting. That they will comply with the requirements of the program, and they will provide information as required by the state treasurer concerning the pilot. And they will assist the recruitment of tenants to participate. In the sub E here on page 17, line 16, it was also recommended by the state treasurer that if an individual is going to participate in the pilot program, that the tenant has to complete some financial education course. I believe that there's some evidence showing that is of value for individuals who are participating in the program. So I've just added a subsection here that in order to participate, the tenants will complete a course as determined by the state treasurer in coordination with the housing provider. And then I've added a subsection that the state treasurer may terminate the pilot program at any time in the treasurer's sole discretion, or terminate participation of an affordable housing provider for failure to comply with the requirements of the program. And lastly, we get to the report itself. So how I structured this was, if it's a 2-year pilot, they're participating in 2026 and 2027. So I actually typoed that report date, forgive me. My thought here was having the report on November of 2028, not 2027. So if you think about it, if a pilot is going for 2 years, 6 and
It's gonna
7,
take them a while to analyze it.
yes, ma'am, that was my thought. This may be something where the state treasurer wants to weigh in and say, that.
It's a long time, 11 months to analyze it, but
I agree, but I wasn't sure what made the most sense. Do you want the report closer to when you are coming back in session to
this
be
is
able to
gonna be
act on it?
28.
Or, yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Or are you okay if the report comes in July? It's,
No one's here. But it does make some sense for the report to come in time for people to look at it ahead of session
yes, ma'am.
and make any recommendations ahead of session. So, I mean, given that we have to do enough prep pre-session to have it actionable in session.
Right. So at a minimum, that date is wrong. It would be 2028. I will, seek advice from the state treasurer's office on what they would potentially recommend. And I'm obviously open to, how you would like to,
Yeah, so let's.
when
think
you
about
would
the
like to
date.
receive the report. So, okay. So the report itself would include number of participant tenants, including demographic makeup, such as race, ethnicity, gender, income, and age. That's voluntarily provided by the participant. That was language I took from the Colorado pilot, so we can tweak that as you deem, appropriate. The number of tenants who ceased participating, breakdown of the cost, including the monthly costs associated with the reporting itself, the reporting of the information. What I saw in the state treasurer's report was, it can cost anywhere from $1 to $10 a month, depending on the volume of reporting that you're doing. So I'm assuming you want information on what it's going to cost if this were to go forward after a pilot. A description of the challenges faced by the participant affordable housing providers and participating tenants during the pilot program. An analysis of the outcomes of rent reporting on participant tenants' credit scores. I think that will kind of maybe get to what Senator Brock was thinking, but we can flesh that out further.
Expand on that, but I think that
Yep.
sort of,
Yep. And then recommendations for legislative action, including proposed statutory language.
right.
The only thing that's missing here is, as I said briefly a second ago, the state treasurer's office did ask for $100,000 appropriation to implement this. I just missed getting that in before our.
Why don't you add it and then we will discuss it.
Okay.
It doesn't sound like they could do it if they don't have some money to do it.
All right, moving into the next section, I have housing and public accommodation protections. So everything in these next few sections moving forward, and let me get the page numbers down just so you know. Everything from page 18 all the way through to page 23 would be adding citizenship and immigration status as protected classes under Vermont's Public Accommodations and Fair Housing Act. So in both these instances, in our Public Accommodations Act and our Fair Housing Act, we have protections. So here on the bottom of 19, top of page 20, right? An owner or operator of place of public accommodation, shall not, because of the individuals. A lot of, standard protections here that you're aware of, race, creed, color, national origin, marital status, sex, sexual orientation, etc. You cannot discriminate against those individuals in public accommodation. And then similarly, under the section 9 here on page 20, under the Unfair Housing Practices Act, you cannot discriminate against these individuals in refusing to sell or rent or in advertising, etc. And so this would be adding citizenship and immigration status into both of those categories, public accommodation and unfair housing.
Right.
There is a provision here, and apologies for the quick scroll. We're going all the way down to page 23. This is in the unfair housing practices section. So we've
What
added
page did you move to? 23?
23, yes, ma'am, under line 15. So we've added a section here that says if it's required by federal law, the verification of immigration status shall not constitute a violation of that section. There was this bill was introduced in the House, or a similar version of this bill, I should say, is introduced in the House, and as we were drafting through it, there was wanting to make sure it was a specific call out that if there is a program, some sort of housing program provided through federal funds, if there is a requirement that the entity administering that program is validating immigration status, then they're not violating the state law by doing so. So that's what this provision is intended to be here for. Okay. We're going to move into a few sections that were not drafted by me and not covered by me. So I'm just going to mention them. And then, you know, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, if you have questions, I know you're working to schedule Ellen and Mike Brady from our office to speak to these, but
yeah.
Just very quickly, this is the LURB appeals study. This would just be moving the date up from January 15th to November 15th.
Yeah, so we can be ready and do work on get ready for the appeals discussion in next January.
And so then the second section here, this is on the bottom of page 25. My understanding is this is related to allowing for manufactured housing by right in certain areas.
So this is Ellen's section, and this is a piece of Keisha's request. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Those two sections are for Ellen. And so then.
So that's just Heidi, that's a section. Is that section 11 or 14?
I asked her about by right, is that one of the?
Yeah, it's the by right manufactured governments. It's section 11. It's Cam's draft, and she has this draft.
And she's aware, yeah. So then under page 26, bottom of page 26, section 12.
So, okay, so we'll just wait and discuss that with Ellen.
Okay.
So even though it has the language is here, but we'll have Ellen explain it.
Correct.
Do you want to discuss it briefly, just so tee it up?
Which part? By right?
This is intended to
What the
be the
intent
manufactured
is.
housing.
What was your
The by right manufactured housing.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is something Pew Charitable Trust presented to us last biennium. We actually, have a higher percentage of Vermonters living in manufactured housing than most states. And we know that our manufactured housing is more likely to be in floodplains and impact people as we see increased flood activity, I guess I would say. So there is still a stigma around manufactured housing. It is written into covenants and coded in language that has kept small lots with manufactured homes out of certain communities. And I think we all are kind of aware of that stigma. There's a reason we keep wanting to say tiny home villages or whatever instead of mobile home parks. But when mobile home parks were created, a lot of them were for temporary housing for people working on projects like 89, the Interstate 89, or, other projects where there was considered to be some kind of medium-term use of them. But they became the most affordable form of housing in existence for many Vermonters and the affordable form of home ownership. Yeah. So a lot of people would like to own something and have their own four wall. Anne Cummings used to bring this up a lot. Not everybody wants to live in an apartment building or a rural state. But manufactured housing and the kind of communities that cluster manufactured housing end up being really tightly knit communities for folks. And people are considering this option for senior cottage housing in clusters for, really enhancing any project. I also think this could help us have more conversations in the future about FEMA trailers and other forms of housing that we need in the immediate term to help take care of people. We ended up giving FEMA trailers back after this latest round of flooding because we don't have a lot of the infrastructure set aside for them and because we have a deep-seated bias against manufactured housing.
Thomas,
But definitely support this, and I'm looking at the language, it's what I'm interpreting is right now, the language allows for municipalities to cordon off where mobile homes can go. And this language is intended to say that if any district, that's the term I have a question about, is that the appropriate term? Because I'm always coming from zoning and zones. So is district broad enough to then say within a municipality where residential development is allowed? My little bit of experience with zoning from my city council days, I'm wondering if district is the most broad term to ensure that any place of the area that's zoned for housing will allow for modular construction.
Yeah, and so I think you just identified something I wanted to say, which is this is not just mobile homes, this is manufactured housing. So this could be manufactured elements that are brought to create a house.
Yeah.
So that prejudice, because there is some of that too. Because we're in another section of this bill, we have an offsite construction. It's not a pilot, but it's continued work on developing offsite construction as an opportunity in this state and growing that opportunity. And so I think it's everything from mobile homes to manufactured housing in our communities. But when Ellen's here on Monday, the 10th, we can get that question to her
I
earlier.
was gonna say, yes, I made a note, and I will let her know that that was a question you had, because she can touch base with you before the. Okay.
Right.
Moving into the bottom of page 26. So as you'll see here under this reader heading, it's brownfields. So similarly, not my area of expertise. This would be Michael O'Grady. So I will kind of just skip through and let you know that there are some sections here that I will make a few comments. This was what is in this version is language that O'Grady had kind of negotiated with Matt Chapman and the Agency of Natural Resources. They had kind of come to an understanding of what was going to go here. This language was also in the House General and Housing Committee bill that they're working on, and I know they've made some slight tweaks to that.
Well, we worked with them on this, so yeah.
So I'm just, O'Grady you may want to ask him to speak to that when he's here about what's the work that the House has done on this language, because it will be slightly different moving forward. But this is the brownfields piece, and so I'm going to keep scrolling down just to highlight the next piece that you should be aware of, which is brownfield funding. So Madam Chair, this is the bottom of page 29.
Yep.
So we have 6 million appropriated from the general fund to the brownfield revitalization fund, and 2 million of that shall go to regional planning commissions for the purpose of brownfield assessment.
Right, those are the grants.
Mm-hmm.
And then 4 million to the revolving loan fund, which says loans, but actually is given out in grants.
So then on page 30, line 9, I just have a placeholder here. As you can see, it's highlighted, which is I've just kind of labeled it broadly: TIF, spark, HIT,
Chip. Chip. I think I'm now, we're chipping away at it. I don't think Chip is a bad name. I have a very happy association with it, and I think most Americans do.
Yeah.
So I believe we're discussing these issues this morning. So this is just a placeholder in the event that is then subsequently coming over and being inserted into the bill. We're moving into a few sections related to taxes. So forgive me, I may need to rely on others and or defer to Kirby Keaton on these two sections.
We need to chat for
but yes, this is removing the requirement that individuals add back into their taxes amounts deducted at the federal level that is attributed to payment of an entrance fee or reoccurring monthly payment made to a continuing care retirement community.
So I don't know where this came from.
Senator Ron Hinston may be able to speak to this better.
So we've looked at this several years in a row in this committee and in finance. I think what has changed this year is, number one, we collectively will try to get a sense of the cost of this sooner than later. It made it through this committee and finance and made it to appropriations, but we have not booked the cost in the budget that we were finalizing at that point. Two, I am failing at my own attempt to try and move away from calling it the Wake Robin tax,
Oh,
because
this, okay. So
because
thank you.
there are more long-term care facilities that are trying to fund that continuum of care for folks. I think it's a really reasonable concept to proliferate that we should have your housing and long-term care rolled together so that you can age in place and move through perhaps different housing units, but the same living place where you can need a higher level of care, but still stay in the same place. So
We love those.
we love those, and we
If
need
you
more
can
of
afford
them.
If you can afford them, they're fabulous.
And I will front load this because it has been hard to get all the way to the finish line. But even some of our constituents at Wake Robin do agree that if we look at some kind of income and wealth calculation to be eligible for this, that they support that because they even if it's not for some of them, they just see the value and they see their neighbors, wanting to stay with a loved one. And, I think that might help make it work for more places. And with that, I have really asked the entire senior housing community to start getting behind this, and they agree that it is a useful tool for middle class folks.
Great. Terrific. Thank you. Wake Robin is all, it just needed to be.
I know, but then
Sorry,
I try
I didn't
not
tell-
to
Right.
say like for Wake Robin, which it does make me sad because,
But-
that Wake Robin is not considered top of the line in any other state. It's, it's a normal continuum of care facility.
And we have one in Kendall. in Hanover.
Exactly.
We have, and we just need more of,
We need more of that.
we could do with 10 more tomorrow.
Yes.
Shouldn't get up.
No.
Okay, so
Okay.
now we move
The
to the
next-
tax
Yep, the
proposal
next,
for the ADUs,
yes,
which,
yes, ma'am. The next section, 19 and 20, I believe that you walked through with Kirby the other morning.
yeah, and we need further discussion on it because we're having, the only purpose of this is to provide an additional carrot for ADU development. VHIP has had a lot of uptake. So I'm very keen on it just being for ADUs,
Okay.
but we can chat about that further. We have Kirby.
So my next section is going to be page 32, section 21, starts on line 14. So Madam Chair, you kind of alluded to this briefly just a few moments ago. This is, well, we're kind of moving into the appropriations piece of the bill at this point. This would be $250,000 to the Vermont Housing Finance Agency to further develop recommendations from this report that they issued in January. This report is related to utilization of off-site construction to meet Vermont's housing needs. So, and they're probably best able to kind of describe how that report came about and how it moved forward. It was not a legislative required report, but they did this work and there are recommendations in that report to kind of further explore and figure out how and whether to move off-site manufactured housing forward in the state. So they have asked for $250,000 to continue that work. Specifically on page 33, here is what they would be required to do in this report. Identify and recommend a set of state policy objectives and priorities, explore opportunities for using bulk purchase of single and multi-family homes produced through off-site construction, gather input from potential manufacturers about how to best achieve cost savings through bulk purchase, determine business planning support needed for existing Vermont businesses seeking to develop or expand, explore creating a working group of neighboring states, and then estimate the funding and structure needed to support greater development of off-site homes. And then the interim report is January 2026 with a final report of December of 2026.
So it is having talked to Chad, it's conceivable there may be some actionable things we can move on in January, which would, our next session. Great. But the final report being December of 26.
Correct. Okay, and then now we're hitting the final page home stretch here, appropriations. So this is what has been appropriated in the bill, to date. We have in numbers 1, 2, and 3 were part of the administration's housing proposal request. 15 million to VHFA for the middle income home ownership development program. 15 million to VHFA for the rental housing revolving loan fund. 9.1 million to the Vermont Bond Bank for that infrastructure sustainability fund that we discussed about towards the beginning of the bill. And then 500,000 in grants for providing home buyer education, financial literacy counseling, and foreclosure prevention programs operated by the 5 Neighbor Works America affiliated homeownership centers.
And, sorry, I am, where is the two, oh, I guess because we called out the 250
Yes.
in, section 21 that we don't need to reiterate it.
Right. I called out a separate section because it's got that detailed report with the recommendations. I felt that just having its own section made
Right, and then we called out the money for brownfield separately, so we'll,
Yes.
for each of these bills, I have a money sheet on each piece. So, because elsewhere in the bill, we have we have brownfields, and we have the offsite construction, and we have,
So the manufactured home repair program,
and the manufactured.
and then there's the 100,000 for the state treasurer's
And
pilot
100,000, right.
program that I
So
don't have in
pull
here.
all that together and have that Monday.
And if you want an appropriation for the committee that's being created to look at housing for developmental disabilities, if you want an appropriation for them,
That work is generally not considered an appropriation. They have a whole section of the appropriations bill that they work on with that. We do not need to identify an amount for that, but we do need to identify who's going to run it. And I think if they're going to be legislators on it, I think my gut feeling is, and it's going to inform legislation, I think I would. What do you guys think? I would rather have Ledge Council manage it and then we manage it rather than AHS.
I can put it in as placeholder.
Okay,
And
let's just put it in. and
It'll
we'll
be
discuss it.
highlighted as new language and it'll be discussed.
Okay, unless-
when it gets here.
Yeah, and then, right, and the 39 million that is here going to the Department of Housing and Community Development is further identified here, the 15 and the 15 to be subcontracted to the HFA and then to the bond bank. That's right, that's all set. Okay. Well, I didn't think we were gonna actually make it through both of all those pieces, so good work.
Somebody just woke up,
Oh,
but
gee.
thank you for doing that.
I did not think we were gonna go through it.
Yeah, good work. Yeah, any questions today on any of this? I think this is all stuff we've heard. We need to obviously hear more about. So on Chip, we need to hear from David White, we need to hear from Ellen, and we need to hear from who else would you guys like to hear from?
I sent an email with some things that I'd definitely like to walk through.
Yeah. Not sure we remember we're getting a housing bill from the House, so we will have more time after crossover to work on things. And that may need further discussion out of committees to figure out if we can do that, but for further discussion, I think VEPSI we need to hear from, because this is a big piece for VEPSI. And we need to hear from Michael Gahn. So those are and on VHIP, we need to, I think those some big changes and we just need to clarify the intent there. First time home buyers, I'm fine with, I think there are programs I'm very proud of. But I think, Randy and, might want to have a short bit to be with Maura.
I'm happy to talk about it. I think Maura could also help highlight, and maybe the banks can too. They just figured out how to get this out to people after 2 years. They just started
Being the
getting
first
people
generation.
word of mouth about how this works. And it was because they came back after we created the first time homebuyer
Yeah.
program, which is bipartisan and successful, to say there are folks who we see who just, they have no one else to ask. They have no credit history. They have no ability to
Right.
make this work with just a loan or a, small
Well,
grant.
And I think working to eliminate generational poverty, one of the key pieces is owning your home. And we have heard this time and again, that this is an element of our breaking these cycles. And so to me, that is one small thing we can
Right.
do.
And we streamlined our definition to be more in line with how this kind of program is evolving nationally. Obviously, everything's thrown into chaos, but we have a lot of first generation things that are different than first time things, like college attainment. And we recognize that if you just don't have anyone around you, not ancestry, but anyone around you who is having that experience now, then it's really hard to succeed.
And on the credit score, the other thing I thought we needed, do we need to hear further from the treasurer's office, or are we? And Chris Donnelly, we could get a letter from Chris Donnelly about how well it's been working for CHT.
Yeah.
Maybe I think
Sure.
at the moment, just given how tight our time is next week, maybe I'll start with Chris. If you're listening, we're going to ask you to do that. And Kirby, I think we just want to have him come in and chat further about the tax. We'll get JFO to do a guesstimate on the tax expenditure.
On that piece in particular, Madam Chair, do
Which
I
piece?
have the JFO piece? Do I have your permission to continue to share information with JFO as this moves forward?
Of course. We need JFO's help as much as we can get.
And not without your directive, we do not.
Oh, yeah. No, they don't include it in draft or whatever. No,
Okay.
great.
I made a note to let them know that you would like to know
Okay.
some money. I'd like to know some information on the cost of that piece.
And one of our pieces of homework is to go through these, see how you feel by the 10th. We really, and 11th, we're going to be needing to finalize the pieces we care the most about and talk about the money. And so that we can have a bill to vote out on Friday.
And I would ask if members have things that I've missed or there's things that you would like prepared for me to discuss on Monday when we get back together, please let me know.
Right. Oh, and Ellen on the buy right manufacturing.
She's coming on Monday.
Yes. Okay.
She's available on that.
Great. Thank you, Pam.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. We
You're
know you. A lot of heavy lifting. So, I mean, not, so thank you very